About a week ago, I and my grandson Jake, 2 years old, stood next to a little creek that runs behind our house in Ojai, and the sun was shining gold on the water. There was a rippling little flow of water around a rock in the creek bed, and Jake stared at it for a long time. "Fountain," he said, pointing at it. A few hours before, we had gone with the family to the downtown Ojai Park, where there's a big fountain, which Jake had approached very slowly, reverently, fascinated by the movement of the water. And now he was seeing something similar in the creek bed. I was enchanted by his enchantment. There we stood, 66 years apart in age, but united in timeless wonderment. He at the water and myself at him. Both Jacob and I are following our natural pathways of spiritual development. He nurtures my spirituality, I nurture his. We are soul-journing together. St. Francis is said to have said this line: "Preach the gospel at all times and use words only if necessary." In fact, there's no evidence that Francis ever said these words, but he did say the following to his brother monks: "The preacher must first draw from secret prayers what he will later pour out in holy sermons. He must first grow hot within before he speaks words that in themselves are cold." Good advice for preachers like myself, and advice that's good for the rest of us too. We must all draw from our secret prayers what will later pour out like water in our words and our deeds. We must first grow hot with life within before we bring our words and deeds to life in the world. I watched my grandson stare at the creek in silence for a period at least as long as a standard Protestant sermon. And the gospel I received from him in that time was as profound as that in any sermon I've heard. And I hope I can pass along at least a glimmer of it to you. God is love. Love is open-hearted, open-minded attention, liberated from preconceptions and agendas. Jake appeared to give that kind of divine attention to the creek, turning his head upstream and downstream with a serious expression on his face. As the creek commanded his attention, so Jake commanded mine. We were one in the attention that is love, that is God. We don't really need to teach 2-year-olds anything about God. Jake is better at God than I am. My job is to let him know that I appreciate his experience of God through his sense of awe and wonder, and that might be the very best gift that I can give him now. A month ago, I took him on another walk, this one near where he lives in LA, with my daughter and her husband and his little 9-month-old brother, Asher. Jake and I approached the back of a Goodwill donation reception warehouse. Jake stopped and stared at the workers, pushing carts and raising lift gates on trucks, opening and closing doors. For a long time, we stood there. I had the urge to move him along toward the nearby park, where there would be trees and grass and squirrels, features that I considered much more worthy of his attention. But Jake is a remarkably equal opportunity attender. Staring at the Goodwill warehouse was as sacred a moment to him as staring at the golden shimmer of sunshine on a tree-lined creek. So I joined him in gazing reverently at the Goodwill warehouse, and if only began, to appreciate it with something of the intensity of his experience. He and I are at different places on our soul-journing way. He is seeing and learning with me. I'm learning from him to unlearn in order to see. He's reintroducing me to the joy of staring. He stares without preconceptions, but at the same time, he's learning conventional conceptions and names and categories for things, as he needs to do in order to function in the world later. Meanwhile, I receive from him an invitation to temporarily release my preconceptions and categories and names for things, and just receive experiences from them as they are in themselves on their terms, not my own. I'm invited to look at what I call a creek, and for a while at least, abandon the word creek and take time to let it be whatever it is outside of my definitions, and to be fully present with my raw experience of it. The shimmer of sunlight on it, the quivers on its surface, the colors that it reflects, the swirling of the algae at the bottom, all aspects and features that have an existence apart from my words for them. All of them command the attention that is the love that is God. In the 14th century, an anonymous German mystic wrote a short letter to his fellow monks. It's called The Silent Outcry. And in it is this line: learn how to let go of God through God, the hidden God through the naked God. His was the way of the via negativa, the apophatic way of direct experience of God. We get to God by letting go of our ideas, categories, names, conceptions of the divine. And isn't this the way of love in general? To love another person is to let them go and let them be who they are in and for themselves, to release our fixed conceptions of who they are, to let go of who that person is to me and open myself to encountering them as they are to themselves. And that leads to encountering the person with awe and deep respect. There's so much more about you that I don't know than that I do know. To be in awe of that mystery. This gives meaning for that line from the book of Proverbs. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. The word fear there really should be translated as awe. Holy wonderment. We love the love that is God by letting ourselves be blown away by the mysteries into which it leads us. It's easier for me to do this with my grandsons, Jake and Asher, also my granddaughters, Indy and Rumi, than it is to do with the adults in my life. I'm just getting to know these little guys, so I haven't put them in boxes yet. I haven't packaged them into too many assumptions. But souljourning with them moves me to empty the boxes into which I've put the other people in my life. Who are you to you, as opposed to who are you to me? I begin to ask that question. And in asking it, even of those closest to me, that draws me into wonderment at the mysteries within them. The very many things I do not know about how they experience the world and wish that I did. One of the desert mothers and fathers, Christian monastics of the 4th and 5th century, lived out in the wilderness, practicing contemplatio night and day. He uttered these last words to his fellow monks on his deathbed. The monk must be all I. To it, I would add, the monk must be all pupil of the eye, that dark well into which light drops, the dark wellspring from which light bursts forth from the soul. When Jake stares at water, he is returning to the water that surrounded him in his mother's womb. He's returning to the water from which all life on earth emerged. He is baptized not by immersion or sprinkling, but by adoration. To be all I, as the monk suggests, as he suggested, is to drop away our identification of ourselves with our bodies, with our identities in society, our thoughts, our preoccupations, and identify ourselves only with the attention that is the love that is God. You ever stared into somebody's eyes for a long time? Very uncomfortable, isn't it? At least when you start. And here's what I've discovered. That discomfort evaporates when you focus your eyes on the pupil, one of the pupils of the other person's eye. Just the pupil. Focus on that. You're focusing on the surface of a black hole, not on the person's face. By doing this, you begin to experience an invitation to consider what the other person is seeing through that black hole in the center of the eye, and how that person is seeing what they're seeing. And then instead of squirming in discomfort, you'll find yourself engrossed in wonderment at the mystery within that person, allured by all the possibilities of that person's existence and experience. In that moment, you will be souljourning together. You'll be sharing the fascinated attention that is the love that is God. Truly, I tell you, unless you change and become like children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Whoever becomes humble like this little child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Now, is Jesus adjuring us to toddle around wearing diapers as adults in order to enter the kingdom of heaven on earth? No, he clarifies his statement by saying that humility is what we should emulate in children. The humility that comes from releasing judgment on other people and things, and the humility that follows from awe. The humility that follows when we set aside for a while our words and categories, evaluations, and opinions. I've become friends with a woman here in Ojai, and she told me a wonderful story about her young daughter, I think five or 6 years old at the time. And they were out walking and they saw a flower, and the daughter said, "Mommy, what's that? What's that?" And she said, "Oh, that's a daisy." She said, no, she said, "People call that a daisy. I don't know what it is. Maybe you can find out what it is. I don't know what that is, but the name that people give for it is daisy." What wisdom, what a wise, loving mother to teach her daughter that it's okay not to know, and that not knowing is the source of wisdom, that leaving it loose about its identity, separating the word from the actual reality of that experience. Deep wisdom on the part of that mother, and a lucky child to have a mother who honors the question, honors the mystery. As we sojourn through life, we start in awe, blown away by the simplest of things, like water, like daisies, like Goodwill donation centers. We move on to learn the names and the functions of things so that we can function in the world. We get better and better at this, so that we can make a living, so that we can serve other people, so that we can work for justice in the world. And then we begin the challenging but enormously fulfilling sojourn back to holy childlike awe again. Our natural processes of spiritual development lead us to integrate that holy awe into our lives as personally and socially responsible adult people. To be able with greater and greater ease to name things when needed and to unname them when needed. To be grown-ups, but with the ability on the spot to be childlike in wonder and awe. Children naturally experience and express holy wonderment and the humble compassion that flows from it. Our job as adults is to notice and show reverence when they express that awe and compassion, and then learn how to integrate awe and compassion into our adult lives, something that requires practice, effort, discipline. In a way, The way we do church is kind of backwards, really. The children are at worship while the parents and the grandparents are in Sunday school. But if we adults work hard at Sunday school, we might graduate into the ideal that the monk expressed in his last words so many years ago. We might become all eye, seeing with the eye that is attention, that is love, that is God, in full and holy communion with the universe. Amen.